and gentlemen, welcome to the Virtual Realms YouTube channel. I'm Ranger One, and we're going to take a look today at the M41 Walker Bulldog, a very classic tank that I am delighted to see has been included in the lineup for armored warfare. Now, I have the Bulldog set up in a very specific manner. I figure in this tank my primary goal is going to be hunting down and exterminating any thinly armored vehicle, which fortunately there are a plethora to choose from in armored warfare. Other light tanks, armored fighting vehicles and recon vehicles, and tank destroyers all fit the bill quite nicely. And as a secondary role, putting in supplemental damage when I can get in a sneaky shot or two on the main battle tanks. That's easier said than done, but the opportunity does occasionally present itself. Of course, you always have to watch out for your number one enemy, which is enemy artillery. They can hit you behind cover, so you have to be a little bit careful, and they tend to do a lot of damage to you when you get hit. You don't have a lot in the way of armor, and compared to its counterpart, the T-92, well, it has advantages and disadvantages in the armor department. Its hull is better armored. Not that that's saying a lot. In the turret department, however, it lacks armor compared to the T-92, and it has a higher profile, which means you have to be a little bit careful. There is one mitigating factor, though, to keep in mind. The Bulldog is more maneuverable than the T-92. At least it appears to be so to me. It can take a hit. That Zalo doesn't do a lot of damage. It relies on sustained damage to take down its target, but we just didn't give it the chance. I can make the Bulldog go where I want it to go. It turns, whether at slow speeds or at high speeds, fairly nimbly for a tank. The T-92 struggles a bit in that department, and this is the main reason why I tend to use the Bulldog as an up-close, in-tight brawler whenever possible. And that's a situation that I tend to avoid in the T-92. Another part of my reasoning for that decision is the fact that the Bulldog is simply not as stealthy as the T-92 is. As I mentioned, it has a higher profile. So it has a little bit harder time remaining concealed to get in sneaky, stealthy shots at range. And while both of those light tanks have 76mm guns, the Bulldog actually has the better of the two, with overall, depending on crew skills and modifications to the tank, it generally has better penetration and damage characteristics than the T-92. Now, that being said, I'm sure we all realize that the ability to get in close and knife fight doesn't happen on a regular basis in armored warfare. Often you're in a situation like this where you have to play peekaboo with enemy tanks. Well, that's where the superior gun characteristics come into play, and the fact that the Bulldog is able to accelerate relatively quickly in forward or reverse to pop out, take a shot, and then pull back. So although I prefer to knife fight with this vehicle, if I can't, I'm not helpless, and I can make an effective contribution to the team. Now in this match, our Object 155 has gotten himself pinned down, and he's in a good position to keep the enemy team occupied, but he needs support. I've been doing the best that I can from distance behind him and laying in some fairly effective fire, but I really need to get in close, if nothing else to serve as a distraction to the enemy tanks. Sometimes that's just as valuable a contribution as anything else. Up until this point in the match, that hasn't been possible. There was just too much open ground to cover, too many guns pointed in my direction and spotting me before I would have gotten more than 30 yards. But finally I get my opportunity. He turns his turret to track me, and well, that makes him an easy kill. I know there's another one up here ahead of me somewhere, and we'll go looking for him. Yeah, the Bulldog is a tough tank, but you really shouldn't do things like that. Fortunately for me, this Leopard 1 is AFK. And we'll go ahead and polish him off real quick and move on to the next match. Now, one rather obvious point that I haven't really touched on yet is the Bulldog's speed capability. Whether it's on a road like this or really any sort of terrain, it can pass through that terrain very, very quickly. And that, of course, gives you a tremendous advantage in positioning yourself on the battlefield. The ability to get into hard-to-access areas, to position yourself for sneaky shots on an unsuspecting enemy can't be overestimated. It allows you to almost single-handedly force the enemy out of what would otherwise be very, very strong defensive positions, or get the drop on heavily damaged vehicles that just need to be polished off. Using that speed to give you the element of surprise is a powerful weapon in your arsenal. And your speed is, at the same time, your most effective defense. And let's face it, you need that speed to stay alive. You are not the most hard-to-spot vehicle on the battlefield. Your camo rating just isn't that good. Of course, when the match is winding down and there's only a couple of 3 vehicles left to hunt down on the enemy team, well, it comes in handy for that too. Now, you may have noticed that I tend to rely quite heavily on heat ammunition in this tank, and there's a good reason for that. I think I made that decision in this match, which I played relatively early on in my attempts to get a handle on how to use the Bulldog effectively. I've moved very quickly into a rather forward position, right under the enemy's nose. Unfortunately, that also means that I'm going to get pinned down behind what little cover there is available. And I'm going to have to play peekaboo and take sneaky mid to long range shots to keep their attention on me. There are only 2 of us on this side of the river, myself and another Bulldog, and we'll be facing about a third of the enemy team, including a couple of main battle tanks. Our task in this battle is going to be to keep this entire portion of the enemy team tied up so that our colleagues across the river can finish up and, if nothing else, capture the base. And I've appropriately loaded in high-velocity armor piercing. But I found during the course of this battle that, well, against the main battle tanks, which for the most part had their nose toward me, I couldn't penetrate, even with my high-velocity armor piercing ammunition. And when I did get a shot in at one of the more lightly armored vehicles up there, the high-velocity armor piercing overpenetrated and didn't do a whole lot of damage to them. As soon as I switched to my heat ammunition, I started doing massive amounts of damage to the more lightly armored vehicles up there. And when the heavier vehicles turned to pay attention to my companion over here to the right, my heat ammunition was fully capable of penetrating the sides of their armor, and I was doing a lot more damage overall. Now, we didn't have much choice. We had to keep their attention on us. If our shots were just ricocheting off them or not doing much damage, they would have been emboldened, and they would have come and overrun our positions, which they could easily have done at any time. However, the fairly significant amount of damage that our heat ammunition did kept them at bay. It was enough to make them hesitant to do anything but hide behind cover, at least as far as the main battle tanks were concerned. Now, they finally got frustrated enough that a couple of their lighter vehicles, among them another Bulldog, made an attempt to overrun my companion. Fortunately, I was able to put in some fairly decent covering fire from the flank and dissuade them from that. And I have to give a shout out to Dragon. Dragon, you had an excellent match, and I couldn't have hoped for a person to cover my flank more competent than you. And I was more than happy to reciprocate when the time came. Between the two of us, we were able to easily deal with the enemy team's counterattack and keep the rest of the team pinned down until our boys won the match through base capture. Ever since that match, I have come to value heat ammunition in the Bulldog quite highly, and I tend to use it more than any other ammo type. It simply does more damage against my chosen targets, the more lightly armored vehicles I'll be up against, and tends to penetrate anyway against the heavier battle tanks when I can get around behind them or to their side. I still keep the other ammo types on hand, of course, for those situations that come up occasionally where heat just can't do the job. But I have found that if you're playing to the Bulldog's strengths, those situations don't come up as often as you might think. I hope this little review gave you a little clearer picture of the capabilities of the M41 Bulldog. Yes, it's only Tier 2, but at that level, it's quite the little beast. Obviously, this is just how I play the Bulldog, and you may choose to go a completely different path with this vehicle. And that's more than fine. I think you're going to find it's enjoyable, no matter what playstyle you care to employ. Whether it's hunting down light vehicles or other light tanks, or whether you're using its ability to blitz in and break up a stalemate by sweeping around behind the enemy forces, you're going to find that it's more than up to the task. Just remember that when the situation arises where you have no choice but to face a main battle tank, and it's going to happen, you need to use your speed and you need to use your smarts. Don't try and face it head on. In the near future, I will probably do another video on the T92, just to give you some comparison between the two vehicles. But until that time comes, this will have to do. Until I see you folks again, good hunting. Thanks for watching. I hope you were entertained. If you liked the video, please remember to subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you. And I'll see you next time.